Get off this train right now, say you're having a stroke. The conductor said it low, right against my ear, while he pretended to punch my ticket. My daughter and her husband were 4 seats behind me. The ones who'd bought that ticket packed my bag and kissed my cheek at the station. I had maybe 20 seconds before he moved on down the aisle. 20 seconds to decide whether the man in the uniform was insane or whether my own blood wanted me dead. Something in my hands decided before my brain did. I grabbed the seat back, let my mouth go slack on one side, and started to slide toward the floor. I chose the stranger. 40 minutes later, in a supervisor's office that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, I found out exactly why he'd risked his job to pull me off that train. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 36 years as a claims investigator for an insurance company, the last 12 of them specializing in one thing: life policies where the timing looked too convenient. I know what it looks like when a death is arranged to look natural. I've built careers on catching that exact shape in other people's families. I never once imagined I'd have to use it on my own. I was on the back porch of my house outside Scranton, Pennsylvania, oiling a fishing reel that didn't need oiling, when I heard my daughter's car pull into the drive earlier than usual. Denise moved in with her husband Coop 11 months ago, after his contracting business folded and the bank started calling. Rent-free, no lease, no end date discussed. We'd developed a rhythm of avoiding each other in our own house. She'd microwave something in the kitchen while I read in the den. We'd nod, passing on the stairs, comment on weather that neither of us cared about. Polite roommates who used to be family. So when I heard both car doors and both sets of footsteps coming up the porch steps together, deliberate, matched in pace, my shoulders went tight before I understood why. Denise came in first, Coop trailing with his hands jammed in his jacket pockets, looking at the porch railing, the dog, the gutter, anything but me. "Dad," Denise said in a voice with too much sugar folded into it, "we need to talk to you about something good." I set the reel down slow. 36 years of interviewing nervous claimants taught me that a slow, deliberate motion buys you time to read a room before you have to speak in it. "Good," I repeated. "Okay." Coop cleared his throat. "We've been talking about family, Walt. About doing something together before." He stopped. "Before what?" I said. Denise waved a hand like she was swatting a fly. "Coop, just tell him about the cruise." My son-in-law finally looked at me, and what I saw wasn't excitement. It was a man rehearsing a line in a mirror. "Remember the Alaska trip when I was a kid with my folks? You always said you wanted to see the glaciers. We found a deal. 8 days. It's paid for already, Walt. All of it." I'd heard him talk about that trip exactly once, years ago, and he'd hated it seasick the whole time, spent 2 days in the cabin. I didn't say that. I just asked, "When would this be?" "Next Thursday," Denise said, a half second too fast. "Everything's booked. We just need you to say yes." That night, Denise cooked dinner, which she had not done in 11 months of living under my roof. Coop poured the wine with a hand that wasn't steady. I sat at my own table and watched two people perform hospitality like it was a play they'd rehearsed only once. Somewhere between the pot roast and the green beans, Denise set her fork down and said, light as anything, "Dad, that policy through your old company, it's still $410,000, right? You always were careful about that stuff." My fork stopped an inch from my mouth. "How do you know the number?" "You mentioned it once," Coop said too quickly, studying his plate like it held an answer key. I looked at my daughter. Something cold clicked into place in the back of my skull, the same click I used to feel reviewing a claims file where two numbers that should never have matched exactly. I ran a small test, the kind I'd run on 1,000 claimants over the years. "I've been getting these headaches," I said. "Bad ones, behind my left eye." I watched Coop's face for the half second before he could arrange it. His eyes actually lit before he caught it and said, "You should see somebody about that, Walt." And Denise cut in, smooth as glass. "He's fine. Coop worries. It's probably the barometric pressure." Their eyes met across the table for less than a second. But I've spent decades watching people exchange a look right after they've told a coordinated lie. I know exactly what that look is. After they went to bed, I found the cruise confirmation on the kitchen counter, already paid, my cabin already assigned. They'd booked it before they ever walked onto that porch to ask me. I sat up until 2 a.m., holding a photo of Denise at 9 years old, gap-toothed, holding my hand at a county fair like I was the only solid thing in the world. Then I put it away, because 36 years in claims taught me one rule that never once failed me. People always leave a trail, and the trail is always more honest than the person. By morning, I'd made my decision in the dark. I would go on the cruise. I would watch. I would document everything, the way I'd document any case I intended to win. When Coop knocked on my door at 7 with a smile too bright for the hour, I said, "I'll go." I watched relief flood his face, followed by something underneath it that wasn't love. It was anticipation. Behind him, Denise gave a small nod. Almost nothing. They thought they'd won. I packed carefully. Shirts, socks, and then I stood over my pill organizer a long moment, hearing Denise's voice in my head, "He's fine." Coop worries, and I moved every bottle into my carry-on instead of the suitcase that would ride in cargo. A small precaution. The kind that looks paranoid right up until it isn't. The drive to the port told its own story. If you were the kind of person who kept a notebook, which I am. Coop said the trunk was full, so my suitcase rode across my lap, but I'd seen inside that trunk an hour earlier, and it was empty. He gripped the wheel with both hands the whole way. Denise typed messages and deleted the threads the second she hit send, wearing the blank, careful stillness of someone doing arithmetic in her head. At the terminal, they went through the priority line first and disappeared toward the gangway without looking back once, leaving me among strangers holding a boarding card that suddenly felt very heavy. If you have ever stood in a crowd and realized the people who are supposed to be yours have already stopped checking to see if you're still there, you understand it isn't loneliness, it's information. When they finally called my boarding group, I walked up that gangway slow, feeling the strange finality of stepping off solid ground onto something that would carry me out past the reach of anyone who might come looking. And that's when a train conductor, no, not a train yet, a crew member in a white uniform angled toward me at the top of the ramp. His name badge said R. Kessler. His smile was standard company issue until he leaned in close, pretending to scan my boarding pass, and his breath touched my ear. "Act like you're having a heart attack and get off this ship. Now." Then he was gone, moving down the line, scanning the next pass, smiling at the next family. I stood frozen in the doorway of the gangway, my own heart doing exactly the flutter I'd only invented the night before to test my son-in-law. 30 feet ahead, Denise and Coop were already settled at the railing, taking photos of the harbor. Was this a joke? Some new security drill? I took one step forward, and the conductor Kessler appeared again at my elbow, and this time the professional mask had a crack straight down the middle of it. His fingers closed on my sleeve. They were shaking. "Sir," he said, barely audible, "I am begging you. Get off this ship right now." I looked into his eyes, and I want to tell you exactly what I found there, because it decided everything that came after. Not confusion, not concern, terror. The specific terror of a man who knows one particular thing and is running out of time to say it. 36 years of interviewing people across a desk, separating the ones who are nervous from the ones who are genuinely afraid, and it all fired at once inside me. "You're serious," I said. "I have never been more serious in my life," he said. And from up near the railing, my son-in-law's voice carried back, "Dad, everything okay?" And there was an edge in it that was not concern. I made the decision the way you pull your hand off a stove. No thinking involved, just reflex. My hand went to my chest, fingers spread, and I said, "My chest I can't," and let my knees buckle onto the deck. The fear in my voice was completely real. Only the cause was invented. The gangway erupted, crew shouting for medical, a wheelchair appearing, hands under my arms. And through all of it, I kept my eyes open and working, because here is the moment I will carry with me until they put me in the ground. I looked past the crew, up toward the railing, and I saw it on both their faces before they could slam their masks back into place. Disappointment. Plain, uncovered disappointment. The look of two people watching an experiment fail right in front of them. Then Coop rose halfway out of his deck chair, aggressive for 1/2 second before he softened it into worry for the crowd around him. "Dad, should we come with you?" A crew member blocked the gangway. "Stay where you are, sir. Medical is already on it." And as they wheeled me back down toward the terminal, I heard Denise's voice, pitched low, meant only for her husband, but carrying in that strange hush after a crisis. "This ruins everything." And my son-in-law hissed back, "Not here. I want you to sit with that for 1 second, the way I had to. Some of you listening have lived a version of this. You've caught, in a face you love, one flash of the wrong emotion, relief where grief belonged, irritation where fear should have been, and you told yourself afterward that you must have imagined it. You didn't imagine it. The flash is the truth. Everything that comes after the flash is the performance. They parked me in the ship's tiny medical office, where a nurse took my vitals, pronounced them excellent, probably anxiety, and left me alone on a paper-covered table. Through the porthole window, I watched the gangway retract and the ship's horn sound, and I sat there thinking about my daughter sailing 8 days toward international waters with a man who had priced my death like a home renovation. Quote, my phone buzzed. Denise, Dad, hope you're okay. Call when you're settled. Then again. Then a third time. I turned it off. The door opened, and Kessler stepped back in, off duty now, out of uniform, his face gray, checking the hallway twice before he shut the door behind him. What I'm about to show you could end my career, he said, but I couldn't live with the alternative. He pulled out his phone with unsteady hands. I recorded this in the crew restroom before boarding started. It's your daughter. The screen showed tile and fluorescent light, the audio carrying with terrible clarity through the echo of the bathroom. Denise's voice, calm and organized, the voice she used to use quoting me insurance premiums when I was still working. The compound dissolves completely, no aftertaste in coffee. A cardiac event at sea reads as natural. It'll take the ship 6 hours minimum to divert, and by then there's nothing left to test for. A pause, someone answering on the other end. Then lighter, almost bored, 4:10. Coop's nervous, but he's on board. And then my daughter laughed. She laughed. I watched that recording 3 times, and each time it peeled back another layer, the dosage, the timeline, the exact price they'd put on my heart stopping. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. Who was she talking to? I don't know, Kessler said. But she said the plan was moving forward, and that your son-in-law was, in her words, on board with it. I looked at this stranger who had just detonated his own career to save a man he'd never met, and I asked him the only question that mattered. Why would you risk everything for me? Something old moved across his face. My uncle, he said. 4 years ago. His second wife talked him into changing his will 2 months before he fell down a flight of stairs. Everyone called it an accident. I knew. I couldn't prove a single thing, and I said nothing, because I didn't want to believe it about someone I'd shared Thanksgiving with. I have been silent once in my life, Mr. Brennan. I'm not doing it again. I wrote his information into the little notebook I've carried since 1988, the one habit 36 years of claims, work never let me drop. Date everything, print clearly. We shook hands, and by the time he let go, his hand had finally stopped shaking. Stop them, he said. That was his whole goodbye. The cab ride home took an hour through towns I'd known my whole life, and I told the driver I hadn't missed my cruise. I'd caught something instead. My house looked exactly the same from the curb, same porch, same garden I'd kept for 20 years, but when I let myself in the front door, it felt like a crime scene I hadn't noticed I was living inside. Every room now had a second history running underneath the first. I went straight to my study, pulled every file I owned, and laid my whole financial life out across the dining table in chronological order, the same way I used to lay out a fraud case before I presented it to a supervisor. Insurance, banking, the deed, my will, a chain of custody, except this time, the evidence was my own life. By midnight, I found it. The beneficiary change on my policy, dated 5 months earlier, moving $410,000 off my grandson Marcus, my late son's boy, the one paying his own way through nursing school on double shifts and onto Coop Whitfield. The signature at the bottom was a decent forgery of mine, except for the capital B, which had a little loop I have never once made in 68 years of signing my own name. I photographed it. Then I kept digging, and the floor kept dropping out from under me. Bank statements showing transfers I never authorized, $38,000 pulled out in amounts small enough that I'd never flagged them. A power of attorney granting Coop financial control, signed in my forged hand. And underneath all of it, the worst folder medical records from appointments I had never attended, documenting a cognitive decline I have never experienced. Confusion, memory lapses, all invented, all typed up clean and professional by someone who clearly knew exactly how those forms were supposed to look. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They'd spent months building a paper version of a man whose mind was already going, so that when I died, it would read as sad and expected, and so that if I ever objected out loud beforehand, nobody would believe me. I stood alone in my dining room at midnight and said it out loud, because saying it made it real. They had planned this for months while eating my food and sleeping under my roof. and I felt the shock burn off the way it does, leaving something underneath it with a much higher boiling point. Cold, steady, patient. 3 days later, I sat across the desk from Loretta Pham, 22 years in elder law, a handshake like a closing argument, and I watched her professional composure crack folder by folder. Forged beneficiary, fraudulent power of attorney, fabricated medical decline. When she reached the medical file, she looked up. Your son-in-law's wife works in medical records, doesn't she? 20 years at St. Agnes, I said. Every stamp, every template, every physician's signature block. Loretta exhaled slowly. She manufactured your incompetence on paper while you were still driving yourself to the pharmacy. I did something I won't pretend was entirely clean. Coop had left his laptop in the guest room, and I'd set up his passwords myself 2 years back when he asked me to help him buy a printer. He'd never changed a single one. Loretta plugged in a recovery drive, and deleted messages rose out of the trash folder like ghosts. Correspondence with a man calling himself a wellness consultant. Discussion of a substance that stresses an aging heart and clears the standard toxicology panel. One message specifically noting, especially effective at altitude or on the water. A price, $9,000 for consultation and product. A meeting arranged in a hardware store parking lot 2 towns over. Walter, Loretta said, flat and quiet, your son-in-law priced your death like a used pickup truck. It should have broken me. It didn't. I'd already burned through that particular fuel over 3 sleepless nights and come out somewhere colder on the other side. Keep going, I said. There's a will in there too. There was a draft on Coop's desktop leaving everything to himself, and Denise, my signature forged at the bottom, dated for a death they were confident I wouldn't see coming. Loretta took off her glasses and asked me the question that shaped everything that followed. When this is over, Walter, do you want justice or do you want revenge? I didn't hesitate, because I'd already graded that question myself, alone, at 2 a.m. I want them to understand exactly what they did, and I want consequences that outlive their apology. She nodded slowly. Then we build it airtight first, and we let them keep digging their own hole. 1 week, she said. Protective orders, account freezes, revocations all filed with delayed notice. You act completely normal at home. At the door, she paused. Walter, they are going to panic when the locks start closing. Good, I said. Panicked people make mistakes. That night, Coop texted, Hey Walt, dinner soon? I want to talk about your future. I typed back 7 words. Yes. Let's talk about the future. He read it as surrender. I meant it as a syllabus. What followed was the strangest performance of my life, and I gave it everything I had. For 2 weeks I played the man their forged file described. I let my coffee go cold, staring at nothing. I asked Denise twice in one afternoon which pills were mine, while a camera hidden in the smoke detector recorded her small, satisfied smile as she sorted them for me. Of course, Dad. Don't worry about a thing. 11 security cameras, installed by a real company I'd hired myself, full audio, positioned in every room where a conversation might matter. Coop and Denise approved every one of them enthusiastically for your safety. Walt, smart thinking, and never once asked to see the specifications. I never realized. Every whispered conference in my own living room was streaming straight to a cloud account, only I could open. I added one more of my own, tucked into the return air vent above the kitchen table, the same kind of trick I used decades ago to catch a claims adjuster feeding information to a fraud ring. It paid off inside of 48 hours. Late that night, through my headphones, Denise's voice, tight with fury. The cruise was supposed to end this. Now we're at 0. And Coop, you said it wouldn't show up on any test. And Denise, dropping into that flat, clinical register that scares me more than shouting ever could. Then we go to Plan B, the incompetency route. Look at him lately, he's already halfway there. I lay in the dark, 1 floor above them, expressionless, recording, and I thought not with rage, with something much quieter. You are not watching me fade, you are watching me aim. The riskiest work happened after midnight. Cloning files off Coop's laptop while the house slept, an external drive slowly filling with everything I'd need. One close call, at 88% copied, when a floorboard creaked in the hallway, and I slipped out through the connecting bathroom with the drive in my bathrobe pocket, my pulse hammering against 36 years of practiced calm. Meanwhile, in daylight, I built the legal fortress a new will, ironclad, executed in front of a notary named Priya Anand, who read every clause aloud, recorded my declaration on video, took my fingerprints, and asked me plainly, "Your daughter and her husband inherit nothing?" "My son-in-law negotiated a price for my death," I told her. "He'll get exactly what he paid for. Everything goes to the Marcus Brennan Nursing Scholarship in my grandson's name and to the program that trained him." She added 2 extra witnesses without my asking. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Families who start looking at an old man like an empty chair instead of a person." Loretta handed me a prepaid phone in a diner parking lot. "If this gets physical, 1 button. Police are already briefed." I put it in my coat pocket, hoping I'd never need it, knowing I probably would. The freeze hit on a Tuesday morning. I sat behind a newspaper I wasn't reading, counting slowly, while upstairs Coop's laptop chimed and his voice went sharp. "Denise, get up here." Error messages multiplied on his screen all morning. "Account locked. Please appear in person," and I filmed the whole thing from the hallway, unnoticed. His call to the bank went from confident to pleading in under 2 minutes, and when he hung up his face had gone the color of wet cement. "All third-party access is suspended," he told Denise, pending a fraud review. That evening I made a pot roast, the good one, low and slow, and served it to my would-be killers with steady hands. Somewhere between the potatoes and the silence I mentioned, conversationally, "Funny thing today? Bank called about some unusual activity on my accounts." I told them to look into it thoroughly. Coop's water glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Denise's fork paused 1 full second before she recovered and said, "Dad, this is exactly why you need someone helping you manage things. You're not always as sharp as you think." "Sharp?" I repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice. Later, drying dishes, Coop hovered at my elbow. "Maybe I should come with you to the bank, Walt. Help you explain it." I smiled at him, gentle as I could make it. "That's kind of you. But I can still manage my own money. I'm not incompetent. Yet." The words sat in the air between us like a drop plate. I watched him search my face for how much I actually knew, and I let him keep searching. That night, the living room camera caught their whole war council. Denise pacing. "We need medical power of attorney. I know people at St. Agnes who owe me favors. We get him declared unfit, we become his guardians, and guardianship shuts down any investigation before it starts." And Coop, my daughter's husband, nodded along like he was doing homework. If you've ever watched your own family plan your erasure on a screen in your own basement, I don't know how you'd sleep that night. I'll tell you how I did. I opened my old claims notebook and wrote 1 line. Sometimes the only way to close a fraudulent file is to let the fraud finish writing itself. Then I slept like a stone. The fake doctor called 2 mornings later, a pleasant voice claiming to be Dr. Halloway, my longtime physician. I don't have a Dr. Halloway. He invited me in for a routine cognitive screening that same afternoon. "Of course," I said warmly. "I appreciate the thoroughness." I called Loretta, who ran the name, and called back in under 2 minutes. No license registered anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania. I kept the appointment anyway, recorder in my shirt pocket, and found exactly what I expected. A rented suite, a hand-printed sign taped to the door overnight, and a stranger with borrowed credentials asking questions built to make any answer sound impaired. I performed just enough confusion to keep him talking, recorded every word, and drove straight from there to the real thing doctor. Anita Okafor, 30 years in forensic geriatric psychiatry, an office that smelled like leather and coffee, who ran me through pattern batteries and memory drills and executive function tasks, watching not just my answers, but my method, and set her pen down at the end and said, "Mr. Brennan, your cognitive function is well above baseline for your age. No decline. No confusion, no delusion." I drove home with her preliminary report on the seat beside me and found Coop's truck blocking my driveway. My son-in-law stood on the porch, holding a manila envelope, wearing the look of a man who's failed a test and decided to argue the grade instead. His hand shook as he held the papers out. "Dad, this is for your own good. You're not doing well." I read every page standing right there in my own driveway while he stared at the hedge. A petition for guardianship. Paranoid delusions regarding family, progressive memory loss, financial incompetence, a danger to himself, sworn statements attached, a psychiatric evaluation from a doctor, Renee Castillo of Street Agnes, a woman I have never once met in my life. I looked up at him and asked 1 quiet question. "Whose safety is this really for, Coop? Mine or yours?" He left without answering. That evening I went door to door with my old notebook, patient the way I used to be with a nervous claimant, and the sworn statements came apart 1 by 1. My neighbor, Mrs. Ferraro, cried on her own porch. Coop said it was paperwork to help take care of you. I saw you out in the yard late one night, that's all I told him. At 11 o'clock, I said gently, checking my new security cameras in my slippers. She promised to recant. So did two others. Three more wouldn't answer their doors at all, and I learned later that Coop had paid them 200 here, 300 there. Testimony bought at struggling neighbor prices. At the preliminary hearing, the judge read both filings with visible skepticism and ordered an independent court evaluation to be conducted by Dr. Okafor. Loretta wanted to file everything immediately after that attempted murder, forgery, all of it, end it now. I shook my head. Not yet. The moment we move, they lawyer up and stop generating evidence. People only confess when they still think they're winning. She warned me it was a risk. I told her I'd spent 36 years watching fraudulent claimants double down right up until the moment the file closed on them, and not one of them had ever quit while they believed they were ahead. Dr. Okafor's court-ordered report landed like a verdict before the actual verdict. Full capacity, no impairment, petition recommended for denial. That same afternoon, in Loretta's conference room, we assembled the whole case. A counterfiling running past 60 pages, documenting 17 separate criminal acts, 2 boxes of exhibits, color-coded and cross-referenced by date. We file everything, Loretta said. Everything, I agreed. I watched from a bench in the clerk's office as the paperwork moved from clerk to supervisor to a phone call to a judge's chambers, and by that evening, emergency hearings had already appeared on the calendar. The next afternoon, a process server rang my own doorbell while I filmed from across the street. Denise answered. He handed her the envelope, and through my camera lens, I watched her face run through its last honest sequence: shock, recognition, fear before she screamed for Coop, and their argument played out in silhouette against my living room curtains. The server's official report, later entered as evidence, preserved her exact words. You told me he'd never put it together. You promised me. That night, my cameras caught the panic in full. Coop mass deleting files, trying to wipe a hard drive with the fumbling urgency of a man who learned computers from an insurance investigator, Denise feeding papers into the shredder until it jammed and overheated, then tearing the rest by hand. Loretta called while watching the same feed. Every deletion is a new charge, she said. Obstruction. Consciousness of guilt. They're building their own exhibits for us now. A settlement offer arrived within 2 days. Return the $38,000, vacate the house immediately, waive all inheritance, accept a permanent restraining order, in exchange for the criminal charges quietly disappearing. I read it at the same dining table where all of this had started. They researched exactly what stresses a heart, I told Loretta. They priced it. They booked the cruise. This isn't a billing dispute. Schedule the trial, I said. Public record. Full jury. When a second offer came a few weeks later, hand-delivered by Denise's mortified sister with the word mistake in the very first line, I uncapped a pen and wrote one sentence across it in the same handwriting I'd used to close 1,000 fraud files. Justice is not for sale. See you in court. I called Kessler that evening and asked if he was ready to testify publicly. He didn't hesitate for even a breath. My uncle never got his day, he said. Yours is going to count for both of them. Their world came apart the way things usually do, slow, then all at once. Coop's gambling debt surfaced through the filings, over $60,000 across sports books and an online poker account, and once his creditors realized he wasn't inheriting a dime, the calls turned into visits, and his truck went back on a repo trailer. Denise's employer opened its own internal investigation, found her fingerprints across unauthorized record access and fabricated documents, and ended 20 years of her career in a 15-minute meeting, walked out by security, while former coworkers watched through the glass. Their new apartment had thin walls, and the neighbors heard everything. This is your fault, your debts, your weakness. My weakness? You wanted him gone. I wanted the money. And then, one night, the sentence that summarized their whole marriage. Now we have nothing but each other, followed by her laugh, bitter and completely without air in it. That's the worst part. 2 of the paid witnesses came to Loretta's office on their own to recant. One elderly man on a fixed income looked me dead in the eye and said, "He told me it was just a formality, a piece of paper. Nobody told me it was about murder." "Tell the whole truth," I said. "That's the entire assignment." The night before the trial, I stood in front of my evidence wall photographs, documents, Dates strung together with red thread, like something out of one of my own old case files, and I took down the one thing on that wall that was never evidence at all. A photograph of Denise at 9, gap-toothed, holding my hand at the county fair. I let myself grieve for exactly as long as that photograph deserved, for the girl who was real and the woman who chose not to be. And then I wrote 3 sentences on the back of it and sealed it in an envelope addressed to my daughter, to be delivered after the verdict. I gave you everything I had. You chose this. Now we both have to live in what's left. Then I laid out my one good suit and slept. The trial is the part worth slowing down for. The courtroom filled early, a few reporters in the back, because a cruise ship near murder makes the local news write itself. Denise and Coop sat beside their lawyer, looking like exhibits of their former selves. The prosecutor's opening was surgical. The defendants planned the murder of Walter Brennan for insurance proceeds, researched the method, purchased the substance, forged the documents, and boarded a ship with him. And the only reason he sat in this courtroom, instead of appearing in a coroner's report, was one ship's officer with a conscience and a working phone camera. Then the recording played. 12 jurors listened to my daughter's calm, organized voice price my heartbeat at $410,000 and laugh. Coop flinched at the laugh. Denise stared at a fixed point on the far wall and didn't move for the full 90 seconds. Kessler took the stand, and his voice shook for exactly the first 4 questions before it found its footing and never lost it again. I heard her plan a man's death like she was scheduling a delivery, he said. I recorded it because 4 years ago I stayed quiet and I buried my uncle wondering. On cross-examination, the defense went after his finances. Isn't it true you're carrying debt of your own? And he leaned into the microphone and gave the single best line of the entire trial. My situation is exactly why I recognized desperation, and I still didn't let it turn me into an accomplice. The document examiner walked the jury through the forged B in my signature under magnification. The bank walked them through $38,000 stolen in careful, quiet installments. Dr. Okafor dismantled the incompetency narrative in under 10 minutes. The recovered messages scrolled across the courtroom screen, the dosage, the timing, the $9,000. My son-in-law's name attached to every line while he stared at his own hands. Then I took the stand. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The prosecutor asked. When the invitation came, I said. 11 months of near silence, and then a fully paid vacation with a deadline attached. In my old line of work, we called that an anomalous claim. And anomalous claims get investigated. What did you do? Exactly what I did for 36 years. I documented everything, trusted the paper trail, and verified before I ever accused anyone. I just never imagined the file would be my own family. The jury was out under 2 hours. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of fraud, guilty of forgery, guilty, straight down the list. Each word landing on Coop until his head dropped into his hands. Denise let exactly 1 tear fall and wiped it away with a knuckle before it could reach her chin. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wished to make a statement. I stood and faced them and kept it to 5 sentences, because 36 years of writing claim summaries taught me that brevity is what people remember. You lived under my roof. You ate at my table. You answered my trust with a dosage calculation. I don't hate either of you, I grieve you. You traded your whole lives for money you were never going to spend. Coop received 11 years in state prison, a permanent felony record, and full restitution. Denise received 9 years, her license permanently revoked, her name flagged in every professional registry in the state, and every inheritance right she'd ever hold extinguished for good. The judge's closing line went into the transcript and into me for good. This was not a lapse in judgment. This was a project. The only mercy left in this courtroom belongs to the victim. Outside on the courthouse steps, I gave the one reporter who asked 11 words about trust and consequence, and declined to say anything else. In the parking garage, I saw my daughter one last time before they took her, being led out a side door, head down. Our eyes met for a second and a half. She looked away first, and what I felt wasn't victory. It was the very specific quiet of a ledger that has finally, fully balanced. Here's what I want to hand you plainly, because it's the whole reason I'm telling you this. The mistake most of us make is believing that being loved and being watched over are the same thing. They are not. Denise counted on that confusion completely. She knew a father will explain away almost anything to protect the picture he keeps of his child in his head, and that kind of denial is the most reliable accomplice there is. What saved my life wasn't luck. It was one stranger who refused to stay quiet, and 36 years of a habit that anyone listening tonight can start for free. So start it. This week, call your insurance company and ask them to read your current beneficiaries back to you out loud. Then ask them to flag the account, so that any future change requires your direct verbal confirmation. 10 minutes. Most people haven't checked in a decade, and the people closest to them are counting on exactly that. Then sit with the harder question, the one I still turn over some nights in my study. Of the people nearest to you, who knows more about what your death is worth on paper than they know about how your actual day went? Take your time with that. Now it's your turn, friends. Because I've been arguing with my own choices for 2 years, and I still don't have it fully settled. Put a 1 in the comments if you think I was right to go home that night and build the whole case quietly, letting them keep incriminating themselves for weeks. Put a 2 if you think I should have taken that recording straight to the police the same afternoon, before they took another free breath. Put a 3 if you believe I owed my daughter one honest conversation, face to face, before any of this ever reached a courtroom. Tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is, where you are. It still gets me every time, hearing how far these stories travel. And if a stranger has ever stepped in to protect you when your own people wouldn't, or if you've ever caught that one wrong flash across a familiar face, tell me about it below. Somebody watching tonight is sitting at a table right now where the numbers don't quite add up, and they need to hear that they're not imagining it. They're paying attention. If this one meant something to you, stay a while and subscribe. I've got a lifetime of these, and this little corner of the internet only exists because people like you keep coming back to it. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. I'll see you in the next one.